ever get hit with one of those accusations? I mean, not just someone disagreeing with you, but like a straight up lie. The kind that makes you want to yell, hey, that never happened. But then you wonder, how do you even fight back without becoming the bad guy? It's like, especially for those of us coming from a faith background, are we supposed to just be silent, turn the other cheek? It's this weird dance between truth and grace. That's what's got me thinking about this thickshades.com audio clip, the one about righteous anger. It's like, what even is that?
It's one of those topics that can really leave people feeling stuck.
Yeah.
Like, are we supposed to get riled up or be totally passive? It's tough.
Totally. And this audio clip, they go straight to Jesus flipping those tables in the temple. Not exactly what you picture when you think peaceful and forgiving.
Right. It's a powerful story. And they use it to show that maybe anger isn't always a bad thing. It's more about, like, why are you angry? Like with Jesus, it wasn't about him being personally offended. It was about protecting something sacred,
Yeah. So how do we figure out what makes anger righteous? What's the difference between that and just losing your cool?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, right? It reminds me of that saying, like, holding on to anger is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. Sinful anger, it eats away at you. It usually comes from a place of pride, wanting to be right, wanting to make the other person hurt. Righteous anger, on the other hand, it comes from love. Love for truth, love for what's right, love for God.
Okay, so then it becomes, what do you do with that anger? The audio clip mentions Ephesians 4.26, be angry and sin not. So it sounds like we're not supposed to just sit there and take it.
For sure. They're saying we're called to action, but not to go off half-cocked either. Think about it. If someone's out there spreading lies about you, about your work, just keeping quiet, it can seem like you're guilty, like you agree with them. Especially these days with everyone and their grandma on social media. Silence speaks volumes.
And I bet that's even more crucial when you think about someone's ministry, their reputation. If you don't defend yourself, who will? But how do you balance that with, that whole turn the other cheek thing?
That's where they bring in Matthew 18.15-17, right?
Yeah.
That whole thing about going directly to the person one-on-one before you go airing your grievances to the world. It's more about trying to keep things peaceful, giving the person a chance to fix things.
So less about public shaming, more about a private conversation. Sounds like they're aiming for reconciliation, not retaliation.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that false accusations, they really hurt. We're not talking about just a little disagreement here. This stuff can damage relationships, damage reputations, even impact your faith in people. They even bring up Proverbs 6.16-19, how God sees those who lie and create division. It's serious business.
So where do you even begin with responding to this stuff in a way that feels both truthful and, well, Christ-like?
It's a tough one, right? You got to stand strong in the truth, but also you want to act like Jesus would, The audio clip actually brings up James 1.19-20, where it says, be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry.
Easier said than done, right? Especially when someone's just come at you with some made-up stuff. It's like, whoa, hold on a second.
Oh, for sure. And that's where they talk about prayer. And not just a quick, help me God kind of prayer, but really sitting with it. Asking God to show you if your anger is the right kind of anger, and asking him to guide your words, your actions. Because let's be real, sometimes you just want to hit back, But that's not exactly what Jesus would do.
So how do you go from feeling hurt and mad to responding in a wise way, a graceful way? Because it doesn't sound like they're saying we should just be punching bags.
No, not at all. In fact, they have these practical steps, and it starts with that one-on-one conversation we talked about. If you can, go directly to the person. That's straight out of Matthew 18, trying to work things out as a community before it blows up.
So no social media rants, even if it feels good in the moment.
It's more about taking a breath before you react, choosing a path that leads to understanding, to fixing things. But, and they do say this, sometimes that private conversation, it's just not going to happen.
Right. What about those times when the accusations are already public? Or the person saying them, they don't even want to talk?
That's when they say a public response might be needed. But they're careful to say it's not about arguing or trying to get people on your side. It's about being calm, sticking to the facts, not letting lies stand.
Man, that takes some serious self-control, especially when emotions are running high.
No kidding.
Yeah.
And that's where prayer comes in again, big time, because we can't do this alone. We need God's help to choose the right words, to know when to speak up, when to be quiet. We got to lean on him to handle these situations in a way that honors him.
So it's like even when you are defending yourself, it shouldn't be about getting back at the person. It's about upholding truth so others aren't fooled. It's about the bigger picture.
Absolutely. They talk about how important it is for Christians to stick together, to be unified. They even say That if someone says they're a Christian but their actions don't line up with that, it makes you wonder if their faith is real.
Oof, that's a tough one, especially if it's someone you know, someone from your church even. So then how do you hold someone accountable without completely writing them off? How do you leave room for forgiveness?
That's the tightrope we're walking here. It takes a whole lot of grace and discernment. And you know what? That's a perfect place to pick things up in the next part of our deep dive.
It's like trying to balance on a beam,
Mhm.
On one side you've got truth, and on the other side you've got grace. And you got to find a way to hold on to both, especially in the church. I mean, aren't we supposed to be known for how much we love each other?
You hit the nail on the head. It's like that verse, speaking the truth in love,
Hmm.
right? It's both, not one or the other. We can't just ignore it when someone hurts us, but we also can't address it in a way that's like mean-spirited. It's a tough spot to be in.
Because even if you're in the right, calling someone out always feels a little, I don't know, awkward.
Totally. It helps to remember that whole image of the body of Christ,
Hmm.
how we're all connected. When one person's hurting, we all feel it.
Hmm.
So approaching these situations humbly, with compassion, it makes a world of difference.
Yeah.
It's not about winning or punishing someone. It's about wanting what's best for everyone.
It goes back to that difference between righteous anger and just plain old getting mad. Even when we need to speak up, it shouldn't be about making the other person feel bad, but about making things right.
And that's where prayer is so important. It's not about asking God to fight our battles, but about giving him our anger, letting him work on our hearts. Because honestly, sometimes wanting justice, it can get mixed up with our own ego.
Right, like I'll show them.
So how do we figure out, like the listener asked, where righteous anger ends and just plain wrath begins? Because it's easy to say, hey, I'm just defending the truth, but when does it go too far? It's a question we all wrestle with, right? And I don't think there's some magic formula. But here's the thing. If we're walking with God, staying close to him, letting him into that anger, he'll show us. He'll show us if we're being dishonest with ourselves, if we're holding on to bitterness. And he'll give us the words to speak the truth with kindness, even when it's hard.
It's like a gut check, right? Asking ourselves, why am I really doing this? Am I trying to build bridges or burn them down?
Exactly. And sometimes the most Christ-like thing is not to charge in with guns blazing, but to step back and trust that God's got it. He's a God of justice, and he'll make things right in his time.
So as we finish up this deep dive, I hope we can all ask ourselves, how can we respond to these situations in a way that reflects Jesus? How can we stand up for truth without tearing each other down? It's something to keep wrestling with, for sure.